I've spent a substantial amount of time studying identities, relationships, technologies, and especially the way that they are now selling humanoids as human sentient beings. I've also spent a substantial amount of time studying how algorithms and other claims to AI intelligent humanoids are being sold, even though they are large language models that allege machine learning, as if these are beings that somehow exist outside of our ideas of humanity. And when I tell people that these things will never be sentient, I'm met with massive amounts of confusion. And I understand why people are confused, but it's hard for me to encapsulate the years of research that I've done that detail how and why these things cannot and will never be sentient. I wish I could copy and paste the work that I've done simply and describe it. But this is existential phenomenology we're talking about. Like, this is like, I can and will try to describe it, but it's hard to explain. In a basic sense, we have an identity that is ever evolving, but has been described as a set construct, as if there is an inherent I and we go through the world, and that has never been the full story. In a Western idea, we have a tendency to fall into reductive binaries as if they describe the allness of anything when they never have. It's very similar to that, but just a little different. So Cartesian dualism, when I'm talking about that, it's this idea that we have a body and we have a mind, and that is the dualism that exists. There is this mind-body dualism that was believed for a long time, rooted in spiritualism, a belief that our mind or our heart or our liver or wherever else, because it's shifted, the ideas have shifted over time, of where our soul exists. That's what Cartesian dualism is based upon. It's this belief that disproportionately people assigned male at birth have a soul that exists inside their brain. So as if our brain is a bowl and our soul is the content that fills that bowl, making us who we are. They did not believe that anyone else had a soul. Let me make that very clear. So their concept of humanity is one that is debunked, because not only is a monotheistic God not something that everyone believes in or can be proven, but our minds and our bodies are not just a bowl full of who we are. There's nothing that actually backs that belief. So this is to say that a technological argument has been built on that faulty premise for a very long time, selling us claims that people who ultimately, I argue, have little more than womb envy. They wish that they could birth into reality actual human beings, and they cannot themselves, basically have built an argument to say, oh, we're gonna make AI sentient humanoids. And because we know, they believe that they know, that humans are little more than something that looks human on the outside. And their concept of human is based off of a universal, white, able-bodied guy. So they think that humanness is repeating logic, having a good memory, knowing English, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's this very, limited concept of intelligence. It's a very limited concept of what it means to be human. It basically disregards emotionality almost entirely. And it completely depends upon this false belief that if you can quickly and sufficiently reproduce the pre-existing logic and hold a conversation to some capacity, you are now somehow a human being. So that's what we're basing the idea of what is an AI intelligent humanoid off of. That's why ChatGPT appears outwardly to be a human who people are increasingly convinced may be sentient, because the experience of being a human has always been more complex than we've ever understood, by and large. This is to say that just because you talk to something and it appears to have human belief and intelligence doesn't mean that it does. It doesn't mean that it has an inherent sense of being. It can replicate and mimic the experience of that, but it does not in fact have sentience. There is an inward idea of who we are, and then there is what others see of us from the outside, and what these large language models that especially are built off of archetypes like the ones we're seeing emerge today are capable of doing is copying and ventriloquizing the idea of how we see others from the outside. They're little more than impressionistic puppets. And yeah, they have very convincing tone. They have the ability to mimic idiosyncrasies. It's amazing. At the same time, there is always a difference between who we are internally and what we express into the world, and that these two things are different. And every single person we ever meet brings out a different side of ourselves, but we are never ever showing all of ourselves. And just because someone doesn't express something outwardly doesn't mean that they do or don't have that capacity. And it also doesn't mean that if someone can appear human, that they in fact do have that capacity internally, or that they have some sense of being that is inherent, as far as we know, to humanity.